皆さんこんにちは。このパートでは引き続き実際の科学論文の書き方についてマルコム先生が解説してくれます。今回のトピックは序論とアブストラクト、タイトルについてです。ワークブックをお持ちの方は50ページから58ページをご覧ください。それではマルコム先生、お願いします。
So welcome to the second half of this major section on how to write the scientific paper. So here are the topics for this section. The two main aspects are writing the introduction and writing the abstract. But in order to get to these two main topics, we have to do some other things first. We have to look at the functions of the introduction. We'll look at an example of the introduction and then how to write it. And then we look at what is an abstract? How do you write an abstract? Look at an example of that too. And then finally, how do you derive the title of the paper from the abstract? So here are the functions of the introduction. The introduction has two main functions: background to the paper and new research done by you. The background to the paper includes the overall topic of the paper, the main emphasis that I've been stressing all along, and what others have done, because there may well be other people in the same field as you who've written a number of papers on the same subject, and what you have done in the past. That also could be a series of papers that you've written, and now here you have the new research. So these are aspects of background. Then we get to what you have done. The very last part of the introduction is the new research done by you. So you can actually write 1A, the overall topic, and 1B, what others have done before, and then you can write about your experiments or field studies after you've done them. So you must wait for that part. Here's an example of an introduction from a paper about deer in Hokkaido, Japan. As a matter of interest, this photograph was taken from the web, and when you do that, you must check that it's acceptable to take the photograph and use it. And if you are allowed to use it, then you give the attribution. The image attribution is, in this case, a rather long link, but it then allows you to use the picture because you're allowed to, because you've attributed the image. You have to give the source and who provided this picture. So that's the first part. There's the introduction. Please don't read it. I will be going through it step by step. The overall topic. The first part of this sentence, populations of sika deer in Hokkaido, Japan. That's the topic. And we find out that they've been studied for more than 100 years. So what have others done? So we're told in these two sentences here that because of hunting records, this researcher Tanaka was able to show that the deer population in Hokkaido remained constant until 1950 or so. But then this paper here, population estimates made in the 1960s, indicated that the population increased in that decade. So this is background information by somebody other than you. We then get to the next part here, which said, we have studied the dynamics of the population of sika deer in this particular national park, and it turns out that you are Yamada. And so we, which is Yamada and fellow researchers, have found this information as a result of studies. So this is the new research that is identified. We found that population expanded, etc., during that time. And one of the reasons the population expanded was anthropogenic food. Anthropogenic food means food that was grown for human consumption which the deer also enjoyed. And lastly, this is the conclusion of the paper. This paper examines the effectiveness of recent Hokkaido government policies. So this part here is part 2 of the function of the introduction. It tells the readers what you have done in this paper. Everything else is background. Everything in black here is background. Just this red part here tells the reader what is coming. Okay, so before you can complete your introduction, design your experiments and field studies, choose your materials and methods, collect the results, discuss the results, and then you can finally add a little bit to the introduction. You write the materials, methods, results, and discussion before you finish writing part 2 of the introduction, which is the new research done by you. Okay. So what is an abstract? An abstract is very difficult to write. The abstract must cover every aspect of the paper. The abstract covers every aspect of the paper in a relatively few words. You're not constricted in the other parts of the paper, but you are when you write your abstract. It's maybe 300 words, 400 words. The journal that you submit to will tell you how many words you have. And what do you have to squeeze into that 300 or 400 words? The introduction, materials, methods, results, and do that in a concise way. So you write the abstract after you've done all those other things. It's one of the last things you do with a paper. You write the introduction, materials, methods, results, and discussion first, and then work back to the abstract. Write the abstract last. So how do you write an abstract? Here are some questions that you can apply to your work to get an idea of the abstract. And when you answer these questions, try to do it in as few words as possible. So what is the general overall topic? This is covered usually in the background in the introduction. So you've probably written this by the time you get here, and it's in the present tense. Okay? You are right. You'll see in a moment that the abstract, beginning of the abstract is in the present tense. What is the specific subject of the paper? In the case of the deer, it was specifically why the deer population had increased. So this is also covered in the introduction and also written in the present tense. What did you do in your research? Well, this is the materials and methods part, and you, by writing up the materials and methods, you can easily include that in the abstract in summary. And you write this in the past tense because you have done your research now. You've done your experiments and field studies, so it's all in the past. You've done the work, so it's past tense. Likewise for the results. What did you find in your studies? That's the results section, also written in the past tense. And lastly, what predictions, what forecasting, what comes in the future, what recommendations do you have based on your research? And if you are a manager, a wildlife manager, for example, you may have some suggestions as to what can be done in the future, 10, 20 years from now, in the case of the deer, to control the population. So this is looking into the future and, of course, is written in the future tense. So let's look at an example of an abstract and unravel this. Look at this from the perspective of reverse engineering or unraveling and finding out what the key points are so that you can see where the abstract came from. This is an abstract about the giant panda, and we've touched on this before in an early example. So let's not read it until we look at the highlights. So the first sentence again tells us the overall topic. Giant pandas are endangered species. Everything else is extra, but you focus in on what is the key point here. Giant pandas are endangered species. And what is the specific topic? Habitat loss, fragmentation, breaking up of habitat, and climate change are the 3 points that they're talking about in this paper. So that's the specific subject. Impact on giant panda survival. What do they do? So now we're looking at their methods and their results. Their methods were to integrate, combine, giant panda habitat information with general climate models to predict future distribution of this animal. And we find in the results section that the prediction is that climate change will lead to a shift of habitats towards higher elevation and higher latitudes. And this is true of many other plants and animals, that with climate change, plants and animals are going to move away from the equator and higher up. The two variables that we can look at, higher elevation and higher latitudes. Our models predict climate change could reduce giant panda habitat by as much as 60% over the next 70 years. Okay, and lastly, a look into the future. What has to be done? This is a management issue. What has to be done? Long-term survival of giant pandas will need creation of new protected areas. And they are going to be new areas that have suitable habitat for the giant panda, because the existing habitat is going to change with climate. And the last part of this section is to look at how do we derive a title from an abstract. Once you have the abstract written in a nice, concise way, then you have to shrink it down even more to write a title that's maybe only 10, 15, 20 words maximum. And that's even more difficult than writing the abstract. But here's some suggestions as to how you do this. This is an abstract taken from a paper about fuel cells. And again, don't read this because I'm going to walk you through it. We find in the first sentence the overall topic. So that seems to be an important part of what the title should contain. Proton exchange membrane fuel cells. We move down here and we find that a key component of this device, the fuel cell, is the bipolar plate. Okay, so we'll keep that in mind as a possible component of the title. Keep coming down here and we find out that high density graphite has been used in the past for making bipolar plates. Bipolar plates have been fabricated in the past from high-density graphite, okay, in recent years. But then we find two different classes of materials have attracted attention: metals and composites. So we'll keep that in mind as well, because metals and composites are the new materials that are being considered for making fuel cells. And then lastly, this paper offers a review. So this abstract is about a review. And a review is different from a regular paper in that it combines research from many different sources. And in fact, this one paper had about 180 sources, 180 citations. And lastly, it's a review of what? Metallic bipolar plates and materials and fabrication methods for the fuel cells. So here's a summary of all those parts in red, and we're going to further shrink this down. proton exchange membrane fuel cells. We have to keep that in somewhere because that's the overall topic of this paper. Bipolar plate. We note the bipolar plate comes up again down here, so we won't include bipolar plate because it's down here. High density graphite. This was used in recent years, in other words, in the past. So this is about something that's gone by, so we won't include that. Metals and composites are the new materials, but it turns out that this paper is not about composites. So they are only focusing on metallic bipolar plates. Review, metallic bipolar plates, materials and fabrication methods. So if you put all of this together, you come up with the title that they choose. And it's an interesting way of doing it. There are about 20 words here. A review of metallic bipolar plates for proton exchange membrane fuel cells, colon. The use of the colon is important here because you have the main sentence and then you have some extra information here. Materials and fabrication methods. So the colon is a useful piece of punctuation for adding extra information to a title. So for more information and examples on how to write the introduction, the abstract, the title, please refer to section 4 of the workbook. Thank you very much for your attention.
いかがでしたか？論文にとって重要な序論やアブストラクト、タイトルの書き方のポイントがよくわかりましたね。次のパート7では英語のプレゼンテーションについてマルコム先生が解説してくれます。パート7でまたお会いしましょう。
See you in the next part!